were given to them. And another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. And the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashings of lightning, and an earthquake. Now the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared to blow them. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth. Sorry, one second. And these were thrown upon the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain, burning with fire, was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened, and a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night. And then I looked, and I heard an eagle crying with a loud voice as it flew directly overhead. Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, at the blast of the other trumpets that the three angels are about to blow. All right. So we are now entering into the second cycle, or the second view of the end times. Right? We've moved from the seals, we now are on the trumpets, and with an understanding of recapitulation, the end times are happening, the seals are one view of the end times, and the trumpets are another view of the end times. And we're only dealing with 1 through 4 today. All right. So we obviously see the repetition of 7. We see the repetition of angels. We see the angels assigned a gender, which is interesting. But the Lamb opens that 7th seal, and there's silence in heaven for about half an hour. And that is a transition, right? It's a very prominent transition because it's actual silence. Nothing moves, right? There's no sound being made. And then we see 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. Now, the trumpet, right, is an instrument, of course, but it signifies that one with authority is about to do something, right? You ever have been to medieval times before the king comes out to give you the speech as to how you're to enter the Colosseum? There will be some trumpets that are playing, right? Trumpets, in a sense, are meant to signal the beginning of something. And here we have 7 angels who are given 7 trumpets. Now, John builds this 7th seal, right? The 7th seal into a climax, right? Silence precedes the action, right? That's, again, we said it's a transition, right? The 7th seal is open, pause, right? There's silence. And then another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. Now, many of you may know what a censer is, and if you do, that's wonderful. If you don't, you can turn to page 40, the 4th page in your documents today. The first image there is a golden censer. All right, we still see these used today by the Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, but it's basically a thing, a receptacle on a chain that you can kind of toss like this, and as you toss it, it opens and releases the aroma. Is it 45? Oh, sorry, I'm looking at mine. I apologize. Mine is 40 because I've added more to yours since I've done this. So you're getting the better. That's right. It's better for you. But yeah, you kind of do this motion with it, and as you do this, it releases aroma, right? I don't actually know if there's a fire burning inside there today. There might be. But there's a picture, a drawing of what it might have looked like in the Old Testament days, not on a chain like we see in today, but more like a flaming pot. As well, you'll see that little kind of circle there over the Egyptian, that's another form of censer. So it could be a flaming pot, or it could be like a tray, like what I told the kids is like a pizza paddle, right? You're holding it out like this, but it's got an offering on it. That page 45 will be a little bit more helpful for us as we work through things. So we'll go back to it. But notice that the incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne, right? The prayers of the saints play a part in things, right? God hears the cries and acts of his people. And it's an interesting paradox, conundrum, how this works, right? Because our God knows what he's going to do, but also our prayers matter. It seems kind of silly to people on the outside. Well, clearly God must not be in control if you can pray to him and he changes his mind. No, God doesn't change his mind. God has planned and ordained all things to happen, including our prayers, including our struggles in prayer. And all these things are collected before the altar, and they rise before God and from the hand of the angel. I have here Psalm 141, verse 2, as a note to hold down, and as well on the golden censer, Exodus 30, verse 10. And that as we talk about the altar, there's obviously referencing back to Revelation 4, 5, and 6. Especially 6, 9. Yeah, 6, 9. So when he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who'd been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne, right? So the interesting thing about these visions, right, these different recapitulations of the end times, is you're seeing connecting threads. That it's not just a divorce and then moving on. There's a poetic movement through these images, right? Through these visions that John is having. There's a poetic movement, almost like an orchestra, right? And how an orchestra can start softly, right? And so with the seals, things are not too terrible, right? Things are bad, right? But they're not described in the most heinous way. Heinous is the wrong word. In the most terrifying way. And then as we get to the trumpets, things are a little bit more terrifying. And as we continue on and on and on, things get worse and worse and worse until we meet the dragon. And so, I like to think about it as an orchestra, right? And how, whether you're watching a movie or you're listening, the music slowly builds to a crescendo, right? Yeah, go ahead.
So in chapter 6, they only open 6 of the 7 seals.
Yes,
Right?
correct.
And then this starts with they open the 7th seal.
Yep.
Saying like the trumpets are back to seal 1.
So good question. So that's why I put, when we did last week, chapter 7, I put verse 1 of chapter 8 there as well, because it's this climax of the end. That the 7th seal, in a sense, is the end. Right? In order to fit with our understanding of recapitulation, when the 7th seal is opened, it's done. The end is here. And then we are immediately then looking at a different section, right? If there's a car crash happening in front of you, right, and you're watching it happen here, the person who's standing here is going to see it from a different angle, okay? And that's kind of the mindset here, and that's why I put it in twice, so that it's a transition for us in understanding that now with the trumpets, we are starting over, right? And it's helpful for us because when we compare the seals to the trumpets, again, things look worse with the trumpets. There's more death. There's more destruction. And that's the theme of how things will go. All right. Any other questions at this juncture? Okay. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth, and there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Now, these events that happen, right? Thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake, right? There's some notes here about lightning. There's a lot of notes about lightning. as well. If you look back to chapter 6 on earthquake, right, you'll see that an earthquake represents God's arrival. In a sense, it's creation responding to its creator. And in the earthquake sense, quite violently. But you'll notice that the angel took the censer and filled it with fire, right? And these prayers of the saints are being offered on the altar, smoke of the incense and all these things. Basically, what is happening here is God is taking the prayers of the saints and then He is judging the earth, right? He's telling the angel to throw the censer filled with fire from the altar where the prayers of the saints are and throw it onto the earth. And it causes immediate fear and destruction. Right? In our day and age, we don't have a fear of thunder and lightning because we understand it scientifically. We know that the odds that we get struck by lightning are very, very low. So we're not afraid of it. Right? If the odds of getting struck by lightning were higher, then we would not go outside when there's a thunderstorm. Or we hear thunder starting to rumble, oh, we better get inside. Here in the Midwest, it's not a tornado, we're going to sit outside. We might even mow our lawn. My father-in-law, I remember the last tornado, my wife called him to make sure, because they were out that way. And so if a tornado's going to come, it's going to hit them first. Right? And they were kind of in a direct line from us. And so she was calling to make sure he's okay. He didn't answer his phone. That made her upset. So she called her mother, and her mother said, yes, your father's fine. He's out mowing the lawn. And I'm like, if that's not the most Midwest thing I've ever heard, I don't know what is. Right? But these things caused terror. Right? When lightning struck, when thunder came, when earthquakes, it's no wonder people thought they were pagan gods. Oh, the gods are angry with us. Lightning is happening. No, these are the actions of a holy God who has control over the entire earth. And now He uses His amazing powers of destruction and casts them in judgment on the earth. Right? And this is before the trumpets even begin blowing. This is like setting the table. Right? This is getting ready. The thunder, the lightning, the earthquake, these are signs. Find cover. It's about to get hairy. So if you turn the page, right, we get into that first trumpet. Though I guess, I'm sorry, before we hit the first trumpet, does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
I guess it's kind of a general question, but I noticed that in the very first verse, John is talking about a half an hour.
Yeah.
That intrigues me, the time question there. But then when he talks about, then he says a third, we were talking last time about literal versus figurative.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, that's right, when he says a third, he's not saying about a third, he's saying a third.
Yeah.
And then about half an hour. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question because half an hour, right? Half, third is a third. So I think this is where we can understand that John is seeing things literally happen before his eyes, but yet it's still a figurative happening because it's in a vision. And so he is, I think the use of about a half an hour is helpful for us because it grounds his vision in reality, right? He's seeing these things are happening. Whoa, okay. Wow, it's silent. That's going on for some time. So there's this grounding in reality that we find. I don't know that there is a true connection to the thirds that we're going to see here in a little bit, but you're right. It is interesting, right? It's little nuggets like this that I think make the Bible one of the best books the best book in all of history. But let's talk about the thirds. Let's talk about it. Verse 7. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. Now, you'll notice the word burned 3 times, right? Repetition points to severity. Right? When we have a repetition like this in this kind of language, poetic, apocalyptic language, it's meant to help us understand there's a severity to what's going on, in this case, the burning. Now, before we get to the thirds, it's interesting. There are three uses, or three times when God sends hail. The Exodus, the conquest in Joshua, and here in Revelation. Now, you say, well, does he never ever send hail throughout the rest of our time? No, he does, right? We have hail. It happens, right? You may not mow your lawn during that one, especially because it's usually cold out. But that hail, we should understand, is not what God is talking about. When God says that he sends hail, we should understand that the hail is meant to be large, destructive, right? The hail in Exodus killed people. The hail in Joshua killed people. And so we should understand the hail here in Revelation would kill people. Now, I apologize. There is 2 references of hail in Revelation. The first one here, the other one is later on when we're told that the hailstones are 100 pounds. Right? But since it's the end times and we're looking at it from different viewpoints, it's the same thing. Just a bit of fun there. So let's talk about the third. So there's a lot of varying viewpoints on what the third means. However, my understanding of it is that a third points to God bridling his anger, right? That instead of destroying a whole, he destroys a third. Now, the reason I think this is because as we see this happen, like a third of the sun, scientifically, God, outside of science, God can do whatever he wants. Inside of science, God can do whatever he wants. If a third of the sun was actually gone, that would have disastrous consequences. But from what we know about stars, through God's created order, is that stars usually explode, right? Whether or not our sun will explode, if that triggers the end times, we don't know. But God usually has stars, the celestial bodies will self-destruct, in a sense. Stars will die, so to speak. With this third language, though, I have note here Ezekiel 5, verses 2 and 12. Yeah, Ezekiel 5, verses 2 and 12. And Zechariah 13. Just do Zech for short. Zechariah 13, 8 through 7. 8 through 9. Not 8 through 7. So that's Ezekiel 5, noting verses 2 and 12. And Zechariah 13, verses 8 through 9. And what do you find in those texts? You find that God portions his judgment. Because even though our God is justified in all that he does, he still does so with grace. Right? When we look in the Exodus account, God does not totally wipe out Egypt with hail. Right? He doesn't totally wipe out Egypt with each of the plagues. He only wipes out a portion. Right? The death of the firstborn is only a portion. As well, with Joshua, the hailstones kill all the fleeing soldiers, but not all of them, right? The Joshua text of Joshua 10 tells us that as the people were fleeing, hailstones killed more than those who were killed by the sword, but not all, right? I guess the judgment is still happening whether or not. The idea here, I think, in my opinion, and some of the commentators I've researched, is that the third language is to show that God portions his judgment. And even that will change, because later on we get, earlier, forgive me, with the seals. Apologies, I'm just putting this together now. Where does it say a fourth? Oh man, I apologize. I thought there was a fourth earlier. Maybe that's coming. Oh yeah. Sorry. Okay, verse 8 of Revelation 6. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. They were given authority over a fourth of the earth with a sword and with famine and pestilence. Okay? And I think that's the only use of the fourth. However, what we should understand, and I think that helps us, is that if we understand that as the cycles of judgments get worse, right, or go on, they will get worse. And so with the seals, we see a reference to the fourth. And then in chapter 8, we see a reference now to a third, right? A third is bigger than a fourth. And I think that that's going to continue on. Sorry about that. I knew it was there in my mind. I had to find it. Yes, indeed. Right? I did think it was interesting. I don't have any note on this other than it's interesting that a third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, but all the green grass was burned up. Right? Green grass in the Bible does not usually translate to the grass we have in our front yards. When we look at Psalm 75, when we see the prayer for a refreshing of the grass, what is being talked about is that the farmer would go out when the grass or the hay would get tall, the farmer would shear it, bundle it, use it for feed, and then pray that the rain would come and refresh the grass to grow again. And so when we see grass, other than in the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus has them sit down on the grass, I think that's actually grass, like seeded grass. This grass, I think, points to economic gain or economic loss, right? That all the green grass, all the good grass used for feeding the animals of the earth and the humans of the earth is now gone. And the reason I believe that that's an economic thing is because a little bit later we see a third of the ships were destroyed. Right? The ships would be an economic point, right? Because the ships have no bearing on whether or not people live or die. They're just boats, unless they are carrying economic trade goods. And there's all this trade going on. And we're going to see throughout these cycles of judgment that trade is impacted by these judgments. Because trade is what connects the world, right? Different countries. The pagan countries of the world, they are connected by trade with each other. We're seeing that even today. All the countries are trading, and some pay more, some pay less. Will that change? Probably. We'll see what happens tomorrow. But all this to say, right, we're seeing the produce of the earth is hit, right? Trees, they give us oxygen, they give us shade, we make things out of them. Those are harmed, right? The ships are destroyed, a third. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and we should understand that the sea was of vast importance. Whoever controlled the water can control the world, right? Not only can you move your troops faster by sea than by land, you can also feed your families, your troops, your nation from the sea, right? For some reason, the fish never run out. God is not only judging the earth, but He's judging the economic trade practices. He's judging the animals. He's judging all His creation in a sense, right? Which is fine because those things don't have souls, right? Notice first these judgments are attacking the things we humans need. But then we see, right, in verse 10, the third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch. And it fell on a third of the rivers and the springs of water. The star's name is wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, right? Wormwood means bitterness and sorrow. And many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. So if we look at the coming of the thunder, the lightning, the earthquakes, right, as creation responding to its creator, that He is arriving with His judgment, then we see His judgment judges the economic trade, the beasts of the earth, and the various things the earth has, including the water. Then what happens? The humans, right, die from the water. The fourth angel blew his trumpet. A third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened, and a third of their day might be kept from shining. Likewise, a third of the night. Right? This is not how the sun, the stars, and the moon act. God is going to not only judge the earth, the people, but he's going to judge his celestial beings as well. Now, it's his creation. He gets to do how he wants, right? Write down here Exodus 10, verses 21 through 23. Wait, why don't I have that? I made a Bible. I think that's right. No, that's the songbook. That's not going to help us. Exodus 10, 21 to 23. Yeah, there we go. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, and a darkness to be felt. So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was pitch darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days, but all the people of Israel had light where they lived. Now, when we read about the plague of darkness, we like to think that it's just dark. It's just dark, right? It gets dark every night, right? It gets dark every night. But when we read verse 12, especially the end, likewise a third of the night. How can a third of a night be darkened? Unless the darkness we're talking about is not the absence of light itself, but rather the darkness of not being able to see, right? In Egypt, it's not that people couldn't, find a flame, right, and get a torch going so that they could see, like in The Prince of Egypt. Great movie. It takes liberties. But it's true darkness. There is no ability to see. It's as if there are scales over their eyes. I'm not saying that's what happened, but I'm saying it's as if their eyes no longer work because the darkness is felt. It's not just dark, right? We get scared of the dark sometimes, especially as kids, maybe as adults too. But the darkness was felt. And so when we look at what's happening here, this is why I think we should hold that figurative language. This is not the way the sun, the moon, and stars work, right? A pie piece of the sun being darkened. Rather, I think this is playing into the economic judgment, right? Third of your time to do business is gone, right? Third of the stars are darkened so as not to shine forth light, right? And in a sense, this darkness is to be felt, right? And we know that this is special because it's not just that, again, a third of the day no longer is happening, but a third of the night is not happening. Because even at night, we can do some business, right? Oftentimes, I think, I'm not a fisherman, but I think fishermen go out when it's darker out, right? Dusk, dawn, right? I have tried to fish during the center or the hottest part of the day and get nothing. I can't stand fishing. My dad and I both, this is an aside, but my dad made me go fishing with him all the time, all as a kid. He hated fishing. And I didn't like fishing, but we never told each other that. And he thought, this is just what fathers and sons do. And I thought, why are we doing this? Finally, one time I said, Dad, I really don't like fishing. I like sitting and staring at the water, but I don't want to put the worm on the hook. I don't want to take a fish off the hook, and I don't want to sit here. Like, let's go hiking. And he goes, you don't like fishing? I don't like fishing. Man, conversation could have saved me hours of agony throughout my life. That being said, right, all that aside, my life is fun. Our lives are fun. God does wonderful things in our lives. God is judging the earth in these moments, right? These trumpets that they're blowing. And we should see that God is using his judgments not just in a way that would be germane, but in a way that is maybe a little shrouded in mystery. Right? There is some mystery to our God. We as Reformed Christians, we love saying we really got a grasp on most of it, and we do. But it's usually because from that grasp is we understand our God is sovereign. And when you have an understanding that God is sovereign, everything else just fits into place. Right? You don't understand something? Well, God is sovereign, so I'm not going to worry about it. A lot of people think that mystery means we have to worry about it. Right? There's a lot of accusations that get leveled against us that say we don't appreciate the mystery of God. You try to explain it all away. No, we appreciate the mystery. We just don't worry about it. Right? We don't know, and that's okay. And in this instance, I think we can understand some things, but I think a lot of it is still shrouded in this understanding that will come later when our minds are opened by God in the new creation, or when we see it happen. And so, then I looked, I heard an eagle crying with a loud voice as it flew directly overhead, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, and the blast of the other trumpets that the three angels are about to blow." These trumpets that have blown first are tame, right, compared to what's going to come. Right? And nature warns nature. Right? Eagles don't typically speak. God allows this eagle to speak, whether figuratively or if you want to think it literally, you can. But what we should understand from verse 13 is that at no point can anyone say, God never gave me a chance. God never told me to fear Him, to look to Him. Because Romans confirms this, Romans 1, right? Man is without excuse. There's no excuse we can make before our God. We should be able to understand who our God is through general revelation. But because of our sin, we cannot. We need special revelation, right? We need God to hold our hand, to teach us, to tell us. And when we look at this verse 13 and we see, woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, there's a double meaning here. Because if we understand this picture of the end times, who's all here? We're all here, right? If we're seeing this end times thing unfold from a different viewpoint, we're all here. So is the woe to us as well? For we dwell on the earth, right? There's a double meaning here. Colossians 3, 1 through 14, where Paul tells us to put on the new self. Paul also tells us that in that section, that our life is hid with Christ on high. Right? We learn about this in 1 Peter in the beginning as well. Our inheritance is kept safe in heaven with our God. We are not citizens of this earth, we are citizens of heaven. That being said, there is this theme throughout Revelation of the earth dwellers, the earth people. We are not earth people. We are heaven people. Thus, the woe is not to those who fear God. The woe is to those who don't fear God. And if not once, twice, but 3 times. Right? And as we see the connection from the woe, woe, woe to the burned, 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 we see the severity increases. Now, we talked about the Egyptian plagues as well, right? If you go to page 45, right? My page 40. You'll see there's 2 tables there. The trumpet plagues and their parallels in Exodus. And then we'll also see, because the bowls are coming, the 7 trumpets and the 7 bowls. So they're there for both of you, so that when we get to the trumpets and the bowls coming forward, right, you'll have those connections. But the idea here is that God often does things in ways that make sense, not only to Him, but through His biblical narrative of Revelation. Right, remember, when we talked about Revelation in Jonah, revelation just means to reveal. Right? The word apocalypto or apocalypsis, sorry, not apocalypto, I think that's a movie. Apocalypsis is the Greek word which means to reveal. Don't go watch Apocalypto. I've never seen it, but I know it's not a good movie to recommend. If you're watching, don't. Sorry. Apocalypsis is the Greek word. It's where we get our word apocalypse. Doesn't mean primarily the end of the world. Just means to reveal. Right? God is going to reveal things. In the Exodus, right, before Israel left Egypt, God revealed Himself to the Egyptians. Right? God revealed Himself in many ways that they would see the true God of this world. And to him be all glory that there were many Egyptians who left with Israel, right? And that's a picture of grace, because our God is not just for any one person or one race or one nationality. He draws all people from all nations to himself to become a new race, the Christian race, in a sense. And again, God connects everything, right? Remember we talked about this earlier, that everything in Revelation, almost every word is a reference to somewhere else in the Bible, right? Usually Ezekiel, Daniel, Zechariah, and the prophets, but he's focusing heavily on Exodus and the plagues in Egypt. And we're going to see, as we go on, the locusts, right? The armies, the wars and rumors of wars. We're going to see so many great things as we go through Revelation here. But the thing I want to leave you with is that, again, our God is sovereign. And whether or not this is completely literal, or whether or not this is completely figurative, or a little mixing of both, our God is sovereign, and we have nothing to fear. For when the rumblings and the flashes of lightning and the earthquake happen, we know our God has come. Right? We know our God is arriving, and that the judgment is not on us, but that the judgment will be on the people who spurn him. Because God already poured out our judgment on his Son, and we have nothing to fear. All right. Any questions? Anything I missed? Anything you're like, hey, you're totally crazy? Probably. All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you for this time that we could unpack your word, that we could look at this portion of Revelation chapter 8. Lord, we know that there are many terrifying things in this book, your holy word, not just Revelation. There are many terrifying things, and yet you are sovereign over this entire world. You are sovereign over us, and you have taken our inheritance and hidden it with you on high. We cannot lose it. We have nothing to fear, for you are our God, and we praise you that you've rescued us. And we pray that you would use us to rescue others. We pray all this in your Son's name.